You don't notice when it starts. It's not a scream, not a storm. It's a slow fading, a quiet unraveling of the self. You wake up and something feels off, like your name doesn't quite fit in your mouth anymore. Like the person in the mirror has your face, but not your truth. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't bleed. It doesn't cry out loud. It just sits in the corners of your life, numbing your joy, dulling your fire, asking questions that sound like silence. You keep doing the right things, smiling, showing up, being okay when everything inside you is collapsing like a dying star. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way, you were taught that to be loved, you had to disappear. So you did, piece by piece. You became who they needed, who they could accept, who wouldn't make them uncomfortable. But now, there's a war inside you, a quiet one, a rebellion you don't understand. Because no matter how much you achieve, how much they approve, you still feel hollow. That's not failure. That's your soul knocking from the inside. The truth? Sometimes, to find yourself, you have to burn the version they loved. You have to break the image you protected for so long. You have to stop performing your life and start living your truth, raw, uncertain, imperfect. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. But beginnings don't always look like birth. Sometimes, they look like destruction. And maybe that's what this pain is. Not your collapse, but your becoming. What if everything falling apart is really just your soul breaking free from the cage you built to survive? You learned early that who you are wasn't enough. Not because they told you directly, but because the world taught you through reactions, through silence, through the way love was given and taken away, like breath. So you adapted. You put on a smile like armor. Spoke with the right tone, wore the right mask, laughed when you were supposed to, even when it felt like your insides were screaming. You became a master of the unspoken art, how to disappear without leaving the room. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes the most dangerous prisons are invisible, glass walls you built yourself to survive. And over time, you start mistaking that prison for safety. You confuse silence with peace, numbness with healing, being accepted with being loved. But deep down, something never stops aching. There's a version of you, raw, loud, wild, deeply feeling, locked behind layers of shoulds and musts, and don't be too much. You've been holding your breath for years, trying not to shake the ground beneath other people's comfort. And yet, it shakes anyway, because the self you perform can't hold the weight of the self you buried. And eventually, it starts to leak out, in quiet breakdowns, in that sudden anger you can't explain, in that deep sadness that comes when you're alone and no one is watching. You've tried to fix yourself, but what if there's nothing wrong with you, only with the role you've been playing? You are not the version they liked. You are not the mask that got you through. You are not the silence you learned to wear like skin. But here's the hardest truth. To become who you really are, you'll have to disappoint the ones who loved your disguise. You'll have to let the mask fall, and with it, the illusion of control. Because when you live to be accepted, you abandon the parts of you that were born to be free. And those parts don't die quietly. They whisper, they ache, they dream in shadows, waiting for you to come back home. But coming home to yourself isn't clean. It's messy. It's a tearing down. It's the death of the performative self. And that's terrifying. Because you'll grieve things that once kept you safe. The approval, the fake smiles, the I'm fine reflex. You'll feel naked without them, exposed, alone. But what if that's where the truth lives? Not in who you've been pretending to be, but in the raw, unfiltered version of you that doesn't always make sense, doesn't always fit, but always feels real? Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt seen without having to shrink? When did you stop trusting your own voice? What would happen if you stopped performing and just existed? There's no map for this, no script to follow. Only the quiet knowing that the role you've been playing is killing you slowly, and that maybe, just maybe, your real life hasn't even started yet. Because the first step to finding yourself might not be building something new, but having the courage to tear down everything false. What if who you really are is hiding behind everything you've tried to become? Drop the act for just a second and tell me, what part of you have you been hiding just to be accepted? Right, like no one's watching. Maybe it's time someone finally sees the real you. Pain has a strange way of shaping us, not with loud crashes, but with quiet erosion. It doesn't always arrive with warning signs or sirens. Sometimes it slips in as numbness, a dull ache behind your smile, a silence where your joy used to be. And you carry it. You carry it so well, even those closest to you don't notice the weight, because you become fluent in the language of survival. I'm fine. I just need some rest. This is normal. But it isn't. Not really. Because deep down, you're mourning things you were never allowed to grieve. The version of yourself you had to abandon. The dreams you folded away quietly. The love you kept giving without ever receiving it back. You mourn in silence. Because the world rarely makes space for that kind of grief. No one taught you how to process the moment you realized you were more loved when you were less yourself. No one explained how much it hurts to look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back. And so the pain becomes your sculptor. It carves you in ways you can't see, changing how you walk into a room, how you hold your voice back, how you look away when someone gets too close. But here's something no one ever told you. The pain didn't come to destroy you. It came to show you what's real. It came to peel back the layers so you could finally meet yourself underneath the performance. Because buried beneath the hurt is a truth that never stopped calling your name. In Buddhism, suffering isn't the enemy. It's the doorway, the crack where the light gets in. Not because pain is good, but because it's honest. It strips away the illusions. It brings you face to face with everything you've been avoiding. There's wisdom in your heartbreak. There's clarity in your loneliness. There's power in that moment where everything falls apart. Because that's when you stop running. And when you finally stop running, you hear it. The voice you've silenced for so long. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It says, you were never broken. You were just bending to fit a life too small for your soul. The betrayal, the rejection, the loss, they weren't punishments. They were redirections. Not the universe being cruel, but life saying, this path is not where you belong. So if you feel like you're losing everything, maybe you're just losing everything that isn't you. And that hurts. God, it hurts. But pain is precise. It finds the lie. It exposes the illusion. And it leads you, trembling, cracked open, to truth. You are not the pain, but the pain is part of your becoming. Every time you broke, you weren't falling apart. You were breaking open. And maybe that's the real point of suffering. Not to be avoided or erased, but to be met with presence. So it can reveal who you were always meant to be. Not the version that pleases, not the version that survives, but the one that breathes fully, feels deeply, lives truthfully. The one who no longer asks for permission to exist. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when the weight you've been carrying begins to loosen. Not because everything is fixed, but because something inside you has stopped pretending. You stop begging the world to understand you. You stop adjusting your shape to fit the frame. You stop chasing a kind of love that always made you smaller. And in that pause, a strange thing happens. You feel lighter. Not because you've won anything, but because you've surrendered the need to win. Letting go doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it looks like chaos at first, because the identity you built was never meant to be dismantled gently. It cracks, it screams, it resists. But the truth beneath it, the truth of who you are, doesn't flinch. It just waits, quietly, like still water beneath the storm. You were taught that letting go meant giving up, that to release meant to lose. But what if it actually means to come home? To detach not from people, but from illusions. To stop holding on to roles you no longer want to play. To stop gripping so tightly to a self that was only ever meant to protect you, not define you. There's freedom in saying, I no longer want to be who I had to be. Freedom in dropping the smile that hides the ache. In no longer explaining your pain in ways that make others comfortable. In realizing you were never meant to be palatable, you were meant to be real. Imagine walking through life without needing to prove anything. Not more successful, not more enlightened, not more lovable, just enough. Imagine no longer asking, "Am I doing it right?" and instead asking, "Is this true to me?" That's what detachment really is. Not indifference, not coldness, but intimacy with your own spirit. You begin to release the reins. You stop controlling the narrative. You stop fighting the flow of life. And slowly, you become like water, fluid, ungraspable, free. You begin to understand the paradox. The more you let go of who you're supposed to be, the closer you get to who you actually are. You stop trying to impress. You start listening. You stop pretending to be unbothered. You start feeling fully, not for others, but for yourself. You walk through a room without wondering if they like you. You say no without guilt. You rest without needing to earn it. This isn't arrogance. This is clarity. A return to the inner stillness that was always there, beneath all the noise. And here's the wildest part. The more you show up as your unfiltered self, the more life responds in kind. The right people stay. The wrong ones fade. The world bends gently around your authenticity. Because you no longer demand acceptance. You radiate truth. You realize the mask never protected you. It only delayed your arrival. So now you step into your life not with pride, but with peace. You are no longer trying to be someone worth loving. You are simply allowing yourself to be, and love becomes the echo that returns. There comes a time when you no longer need answers, not because everything makes sense, but because you've stopped needing it to. You're tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from fighting yourself for too long, from holding it all together, from living in delay, from wearing masks so well, you forgot how your own face feels in the silence. But silence, that's where healing waits. Not the silence of suppression, the silence of presence, the kind that sits with your sorrow without trying to fix it, the kind that doesn't rush you toward a better version, the kind that whispers, "You don't have to become anything. You already are." This is the moment you stop striving. You stop resisting what is. You stop trying to edit your experience into something cleaner, something safer, something more acceptable. You meet yourself, not the story, not the trauma, not the labels or the layers, but the simple awareness that sees it all, the stillness beneath the ache. And in that stillness, and you begin to understand, healing isn't a destination. It's not something you arrive at. It's something you surrender to. There's no final version of you waiting at the end of this. No perfect, healed self that makes it all worth it. There's only this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't need to figure everything out. Maybe you don't need to explain why you're still hurting. Maybe the most honest thing you can do is sit with your pain without trying to turn it into poetry. Sometimes growth doesn't look like a breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like resting your hand on your chest and saying, "This hurts, and I'm still here." You stop trying to escape. You stop searching for a version of life where nothing aches. Instead, you learn to breathe with the ache, to exist alongside the wound, without letting it become your name. This is the quiet revolution. No fireworks, no applause. Just the soft miracle of being with yourself without needing to be more than what you are. That's what healing really is. It's not about rising above. It's about sinking into what's real. It's about meeting life as it is, not as it should be, and letting that be holy. You let go of the war. You stop fighting the waves, and you begin to float. Not because the sea has calmed, but because you've stopped thrashing. Surrender is not weakness. It's trust. It's choosing to believe that life isn't out to get you, that your pain isn't punishment, that maybe, just maybe, this moment, exactly as it is the medicine you've been resisting. You don't need to transcend your humanity. You need to return to it, to feel the sun on your skin without earning it, to cry without apologizing, to laugh without performance, to rest without guilt. And in that return, you find something softer than hope, stronger than resilience, wholeness, the version of you that was never broken, never behind, never unworthy, just buried under layers of survival. And as you breathe here, in this unarmored presence, you realize You've never been alone. Not really. Even in the deepest void, your soul was whispering, "Come back." So maybe this is the invitation. Not to fix, not to fight, but to feel, to be, to belong to yourself fully. And if there's one last question left echoing in this silence, let it be this. What if everything you're looking for begins the moment you stop trying to become someone else?